Hello again, Steve here with a few comments about freedom. Freedom is very near and dear to me for sure, as it is to many people. I would describe myself as some sort of a freedom activist for a number of years, and not very effective at it, mind you, but at least I do what comes to mind and what I think might help. For example, some of you know that I walked 8,000 kilometers with a flag on my back a couple of years ago that said Freedom Walk. And it was the emblem, as I've shown before, was the dove and the olive branch superimposed upon the rising sun. And there's a lot of symbology in that, which I've gone through a couple of times. The idea of peace and a new beginning and all that sort of thing, right? But freedom, you know, getting clearer on what freedom is, I think is important. It's an ongoing question, right? And I've talked about this before. Many people have talked about this before. But more and more that I think about it, freedom is distinct from a privilege. And the word gets perverted by authoritarians who like to think of in terms of like the social freedom and the freedom of the collective and all. It's all just a bunch of nonsense. But it's distinct from, I would say, a privilege, because a privilege would be, you're a 4-year-old kid and you get to have one candy because, more than that your mom might think would rot your teeth. So, the supply of candy is controlled by mom. So you only get, and she puts it in a place where you don't know, you only get what she gives you. So that's like a privilege, Once you have it, then you have the freedom to eat it, or not to eat it, whatever the case may be. So that leads me to more carefully defining freedom. And freedom is if we can do it, we are free to do it. Which would mean that, in very simple terms, of course, that if I don't have any legs, then I'm not free to walk. At least not on legs. Like maybe I could walk on my arms if my arms are longer than my stub. But I don't have the freedom to walk because I can't walk. And I get to, whatever I can do, I'm free to do. Which means that also with respect to other people, that they're also free to do what they can do. And this is a very relieving way of thinking about this, I think, because although it sounds odd, it sounds like, oh, Steve, you're just advocating for people to do whatever they want. So people go around murdering people. And I will say, well, first of all, they already are. That happens. And they are free to do it because they can do it. Now, there's people, at the same time, we human beings have the freedom to defend ourselves if we can defend ourselves, or to outsource the defense of ourselves to others by hiring them. So a lot of times these things get perverted, and a lot of times what things are talked about in terms of freedoms are actually privileges, technically. And people can restrict us from doing things, right? Like people can put us in a cage, lock the cage. At that point, we are free to walk around the cage, but we're not free to walk outside the cage. So they can curtail our freedoms by curtailing our abilities. They could cut parts off of us, and therefore we would no longer have the use of those. This is not a moral definition or a moral judgment or anything like that, whether it's right or wrong. It's just what it is, right? Like when we put cows in a pasture, if they break out, they're free of the enclosure of the pasture. And they have the ability then, until something stops it, the farmer cuts it off or ropes it with a horse or whatever it is and brings it back, then its freedom is curtailed by its surroundings, by its enclosure, or it being put on a rope, on a stake or something like that. So yes, our freedoms are constantly curtailed. No question about it. They're curtailed by nature itself. Like right now I'm sitting in my truck overlooking the river here, high up on a bank, I might want to think, if I was deluded enough, I might think that I could just drive ahead and my truck would fly through the air to the other side of the river. Well, I'm free to try, but nature doesn't care whether I'm free to try, whether I think I can or I can't. The laws of nature are going to dictate that. So one thing that dictates it is nature. Another aspect of nature are human beings themselves. We're part of nature, right? So if another human being tries to curtail me from doing something, that is a force of nature that's curtailing me to do something. But it doesn't mean that I still don't have freedom to operate within the curtailment, right? And this is what's so wonderful about human nature is we always retain abilities so long as we're alive, and therefore we always have freedom to operate within those abilities. So that's all it is. Freedom is just ability. Right? The people who are locked up in a gulag somewhere and they're hustled around and shuffled around on, with ankle shackles and all this sort of stuff, their physical freedoms are curtailed, for sure. And looking at that in a moral way, we can say that that's wrong, yes. But in terms of pure freedom, we can still look at that they do have freedom of certain things. They have freedom of thought, for example. Freedom of attitude, freedom of ability to talk when they can, etc. So there always is, as long as we're alive, we always have freedom, which means that we always can choose. We can always make choices, and it comes right down to it. Freedom is the ability to choose. It is the ability to choose. Because once again, that's ability, right? If we just from a conscious standpoint, if we get up in the middle of the night and sleepwalk, somebody told us we were sleepwalking, well, that's not really an expression of freedom in the way I'm talking about it, because we have no awareness of it. It's not a decision. I'm gonna walk down this hallway or into this door. I'm completely sleepwalking. It's just like I'm just in a dream, but my body is involved in the dream. It's another state. It's an unconscious state. So, it's just like, my heart is beating, but it's beating unconsciously. I haven't figured out how to just by the mental activities speed it up, stop it, make it pump in the reverse or anything like that. It's just doing what it's doing based on the genetic imprints of the animal that is the human body. So that's not really an expression of freedom. The expression of freedom would be to create heart health through, I'm going to make a decision to exercise, for example, and that would affect my heart. That's freedom. So it's an interesting thing. There's several facets to freedom, right? There's the morality of what should be free, what should be free expression among human beings. There's what's privilege, there's what's freedom. But freedom itself, I would say, is rather morally neutral. It's whether we have the ability to do something. And people are free to murder other people. Yes. At the same time, people who might be murdered, or people who know that somebody is a murderer, also have the freedom to curtail that individual. So you see that freedom is spread around humanity at large, and that when you start to see those sorts of things, those are then moral injunctions or prohibitions and so on upon people's actions. But that doesn't really have anything to do with freedom. Well, it does have to do with freedom, but the moral aspect of it, I would say, doesn't really have directly to do with freedom, not the fundamental of it. So I just wanted to share that, because I was thinking about that when I was out on a run this morning, and it came to me as something that, yeah, maybe it's worth getting ourselves thinking about that and getting clarity on it, and realizing that, for ourselves, I'm not saying that this is true or conclusive or whatever, but if it could encourage other people to think about what freedom means to them, that might be helpful, because there's nothing really more important than freedom, right? So long as we're alive, that is what aliveness is, mostly. I mean, we could be, especially functionally, we could be alive physically but in a coma. Well, but in that case, while we're alive, we don't have freedom, basically, because we don't have any ability to consciously do anything. But as long as we're consciously alive, then we do have freedom. And that is really the measure of aliveness, I would say. And so that's very, very important to consider that in how we conduct ourselves. Steve here, getting great chatting. If you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and share, and comment in the box below. Talk again soon. Bye-bye for now.